Welcome to Mentoring Moments. Mentoring Moments is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. It is composed of clips taken from Jason's one-to-one and group mentorship sessions. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast with me, Jason Greenwood, your host. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome our next amazing guest, Mr. Joshua Lee from First Light Studios. Welcome, Josh.
Great to be here, Jason. Super excited to be here and can't wait to get into the content.
Yeah, me too. We were introduced by Kara Babb. I've had her on the podcast recently, and she's just a legend, and she's putting out some great stuff on LinkedIn. So I'm very appreciative that she was able to introduce us.
Absolutely. And as we were talking, Jason, I also help brands and manufacturers, business owners scale up their businesses. So we specialize in taking brands from 1 to 10 million. And a lot of times, as I was talking about, the bottleneck is not necessarily the marketing tactics, but it's a leadership problem. And so what I always say is, if you want to build a $10 million business, you have to become a $10 million leader first. So
Wow.
Super excited to talk about all the things related to that.
I love it. I love it. Now, before we get into that whole side of things and First Light and what you do and how you do it, why you do it, tell us how you even got to be in this wonderful world of e-commerce. I see you've been an investor in brands, senior account manager in marketing agencies. You've done product management. You've been a business advisor. You've run the gamut when it comes to sales, marketing, brand development, and everything in between. But I don't necessarily see anything that would immediately make me go, Josh is going to start up a Amazon and Walmart focused brand development agency. That I wouldn't normally just look at that and go automatically. What was the attraction for you getting into this world?
Thank you. Yeah, amazing question. It all starts obviously at our origins, right? Who our parents are, where we grew up. So my parents actually immigrated from Korea, and you won't see this anywhere on LinkedIn. I grew up in Alaska. They moved from Korea, like the farmlands, to Alaska, and they moved up north even in the northern part of Alaska. And they moved because one of my family members was in the military or married somebody. My aunt married a guy in the army, and then they went to North Alaska where he was stationed. And then over time, that's where my family ended up. And my dad met my mom in Korea, and then I was born in Alaska and grew up there. But I would say I actually grew up pretty poor, and they actually started out as restaurant entrepreneurs. They started a restaurant, they started a hotel, but there were some things that happened and they just weren't able to recover. So they came in the 80s and the 90s, just weren't able to recover. And like for me growing up, I always watched my parents work really hard. What you also want to see is that they're both handicapped. So had a bunch of physical disabilities. And so I really watched them push their bodies to the limit. And because of that, it helped me become more scrappy and helped me to be entrepreneurial when I was younger. I needed to buy things. And so one thing I actually got into was fixing up broken electronics and selling them on eBay back in 2008. Like I checked my eBay account, so it started in 2008. And I feel like that's pretty early in the e-commerce world. And then when I went to college out here at the University of Washington, I actually looked into how to become an Amazon seller because it was an evolution of eBay. But at the time, I think they're giving out like free Amazon memberships if you're a student. And how to sell on Amazon, it was just a word block, and it wasn't very specific. And so I was like, this is too hard. I can't do it. But fast forward years later, right? My first job, I worked at an angel investment group in Seattle, and then ended up working at a couple startups. And that was when I realized I wanted to actually move out of an investor role and move into an operator role to learn how do you actually build these things? How do you actually build these companies? And so next thing, I ended up working at a great agency here in Seattle. Next thing, fast forward many years, this is going into my 9th year now doing Amazon related work, and got an agency. And had you asked me, is this something that I would do back 9 years ago? Definitely not. Back then, there just wasn't a lot of content out there. You just couldn't learn as much as you can now. Everything under the sun is on GPT and on YouTube now, but back then it was a totally different world. I guess that's a little bit of my story. I think the number one lesson that I learned though, and the reason why I bopped around in so many different industries was because I always had a high desire to learn and I wanted to understand how to do it. But I think what it was, I wasn't being true to what I wanted to do. And I was just following what I thought other people or my parents wanted me to do. And so those early career decisions were based on that versus what I'm doing now. And so that's the major takeaway. And I think the cool thing is, as long as you can create like a 6, 12, 18-month transition plan, anybody can start doing the things that the career that they actually wanted to do.
Wow, I couldn't agree more. And as a husband of a Asian wife, my wife's half Chinese, half Vietnamese, and so I can definitely attest to my appreciation and understanding of the pressure in the Asian culture to achieve, to win, to do what you're told, to follow the rules, to respect and obey your elders, to save face. I'm fully on board with what that takes to resist against, especially if it's something you really have a passion inside to do something that's out of the box, out of the ordinary, not necessarily what your parents would recommend that you do or that they would have pride in. It's not becoming a doctor or becoming a lawyer or becoming an engineer. If you say, look, I'm going to start up an agency helping Amazon brands be successful, half the time they're going to go, what's Amazon for a start off? And so this is a challenging thing. And I think it shows a real passion for you to do what you did to break out of the mold, so to speak, and become really hyper independent and to follow your passion. That's something that I have a deep respect for. Now, First Light Studios. Now, when I first saw that name, I thought, oh, this is a production company? Are they making content? Are they a videography company? Or does this harken back to your Alaskan story and the fact that First Light in America tends to hit Alaska first because of their position on the globe? How did you even come up with this name and what was it designed to represent?
Absolutely. Great question again. The First Light Studios, it actually came more for, although yes, the sun does last for 24 hours in some regions of Alaska, it actually came from my desire for being able to be a support and for being able to come alongside clients and our partners really and be a fresh light, be the feeling that you get when you are living in Seattle during the winter and the spring and you only see 3 days of sun and then finally you see sun in the morning. Like that feeling, that sensation you get, that's where it came from. Now, First Light Studios, in hindsight, Studios probably wasn't like the best. It could have been like First Light Agency or something like that. It's not, it's more creative. We do creative. In terms of that feeling and evoking that emotion and delivering and coming alongside a lot of these companies because they do need that fresh perspective and they do need support, especially just with the margin pressure that companies are getting these days and the staff is already maxed out. Usually the staff is maxed out. The leaders are maxed out. Everybody is really good at filling their time. And how do we come in and help them alleviate that and also just be that first light for their marketing, their Amazon sales channel?
I love it. I love it. No, that makes complete sense. And are you primarily working with Amazon native brands, or are you primarily working with, say, a D2C brand that has maybe even seen significant success in D2C? Maybe they got physical retail, maybe they've got online, maybe they got a Shopify store, whatever it might be. And then they say, hey, look, we really want to do this Amazon thing. We want to add the Amazon channel. And we might be really good at this D2C thing. We might be really good at this branding thing. And we might even be pretty good at this digital marketing thing from maybe a paid and performance perspective, a content perspective, an SEO perspective. But we don't really get this Amazon game. And we know that if we don't do it right, we're going to fall down the rankings. We won't fulfill on time. We potentially will even get banned from Amazon because Amazon is notoriously ruthless based on vendor performance and how good they do in living up to the promises that they set for their customers in terms of time to delivery, availability of inventory, all those things. Like they set a really high bar of trust with their customers, i.e. those of us that buy off of Amazon, and therefore they have to, the trust all starts with the vendors who sell on the platform, whether it be 1P or 3P. And so my question is, what is the largest cohort of your customers? Are you typically working with Amazon natives that kind of know Amazon or think they know it really, but they don't necessarily know how to they don't know how to 10x their Amazon performance to go from 1 million to 10 million? Or is it, hey, look, we're doing well somewhere else, but we have no idea how to start and dominate on Amazon?
Absolutely. Would love to. These are some great questions. Basically, a core part of our customers, I'll just back up a little bit. A big part of our customer base has omnipresence on the online or brick and mortar. So they're already selling into, if they're in home and personal care, they're already selling into a Walgreens, CVS here in the States,
Selling into retail.
Walmart, they're in, you might be in Costco. We work with those, and we do work with brand new launches as well in terms of like patent owners, folks coming out of Shark Tank. But part of our core ethos is really coming alongside and supporting products and companies that are changing the world for the better. And so their product is actually useful. Going back to fundamental business, right? Do you have a competitive advantage? Is there something that's hard to replicate here? Do you have a core competence within your existing company, whether it's speed to market, more marketing dollars, et cetera, et cetera? These are all factors that we consider before we even take on a client, because for us, those are very important aspects of business. So in terms of your question around, do we work with established businesses, Amazon natives? The answer is yes. Most of our clients, they know Amazon in and out. They've been in that channel for a time. Obviously, Amazon is a very big player. I believe it's approaching 50% of online US e-com share here. And that is just too big to ignore. In terms of how companies are approaching Amazon, it differs based on so many factors. Are they really going after winning share of voice? They're just trying to be a leader. They're trying to make their brand top of mind for customers. Or are they maybe a privately owned company? Maybe they do, the total business does 10, 15 million. Amazon does 5, maybe more. It's a significant channel, and profitability is really important for them. Right? Those are two different tactics that require understanding the business that they have and what's important for them, and building a strategy and tactic that really is a couple of tweaks here and there. But so, yeah.
Awesome. And when you first start working with a new brand, let's say you decide, yep, you're a good fit. You feel like you're a sustainable business in the sense that you're going to be able to weather these economic storms that come. You're going to be able to weather tariffs. You're going to be able to weather a COVID-like scenario. You're going to be able to weather all these things. You've got a sustainable business model. You've got solid sourcing and pipeline. You've got solid NPD. Maybe you even have some hero SKUs, some hero ASINs that are already performing pretty well on Amazon. So we feel like, hey, we've at least got the foundations. We're not starting from scratch. We're not trying to build a business here. You've gotten it to a certain point, and now you need help being able to scale it to something 10, 20, 30x to what it is today. And you need some help to navigate those waters of expansion and scale. When you first come in, what are some of the key things you look at? Do you help them with their organic rankings? Do you help them with their paid and performance marketing on Amazon, their PPC marketing on Amazon? Do you help them with inventory placement strategy across FBA? Do you help them with market seeding with new ASINs, or looking at expansion opportunities, looking at ways in which you can help them further differentiate their product in a very competitive, crowded space? Like, what are some of the key levers that you try to identify really early on? Because I know I've run and built agencies, so I know you've got to get some runs on the board pretty early on to justify your existence. And then every single month, you kind of have to continue to justify your existence to be able to continue to earn your merchants' trust so that they continue to see value in working with you. So what are some of those kind of typical low-hanging fruit, quick win things that you do to engender trust with your merchants? And then what are some of the more longer-term plays that you need to help most of these businesses with to get right, to nail it and scale it long term?
Absolutely. I'll start out with the longer term play. this is something that we talked about earlier during our prep, but it's the consistency portion. It's consistently showing up, looking at your numbers and tracking and figuring out what it is that we're doing that's working and what it is that we're not doing that's not working, that we don't need to do anymore. Because a lot of times when you are 1 million, 5 million, 10 million in business, all the low hanging fruit, so like A plus content, brand store, having those EBC images, having your review count be high enough for any of your other product assortment. So you have 100 SKUs, right? And the bottom 80 don't have any reviews. Those are all low hanging fruit that are typically not there anymore, right? So at that point, those are all aspects that we can help with. And we internally, we follow a checklist here, and there's about 9 pillars. It just starts from the ground up because we see the Amazon channel as you would building any other business. You need the foundations of profit margin, whether you're on Seller Central or you're on Vendor Central. You need to make sure you have a good assortment, your content, you're well merchandised online, your advertising systems are in place, whether you got your PPC or your DSP, making sure you have goals, you're tracking to those goals. If you're using an agency, what are they accountable for? What's the ROAS, the tacos that you want to hit, right? And it just goes on. And at the top level, we have the strategic aspect where it's like, hey, in 12, 24, 36 months, where do we want to be? How do we set those numbers? And what are we tracking to each month? And I think that's the area that that's very difficult for a lot of brands to stay on top of, because you have to understand your business at a very granular up, and more doesn't mean better. Less is really more. And a lot of times our clients rely on us to free up their time so they can focus on other aspects of the business. One example I can share is earlier this year, we launched a brand that came out of Europe. They were Vendor Central for a long time. They forgot about the business. They worked through different online distributors and just let them sell on Amazon. And so they said, hey, we really need to enforce MAP. We really need to take back brand control. Our pages look really bad. And, our brand store is not the right brand store. It's linking to other products. How do we fix that? And so they tried a couple different firms, and what it requires is a deep understanding into how the Amazon catalog and brand registry works, right? And really simply, in terms of that particular issue, every product detail page is linked to a brand node ID. And so you gotta know those little ins and out details. And having a team that a large part of our team used to work at Amazon. I didn't. They used to work there for 4, 5, 6 years on the catalog team. They're catalog managers or category managers. And that's where the secret sauce comes in, where we're able to actually make sure those listings are properly fixed in a very short amount of time. But even for us as an agency, it can still take us 2 to 3 months to fix an issue particularly. But yeah, that is a very, going back to your original question, that is a very big question to like short-term and long-term tactics. There is just so much there. But yeah, that's just a quick example. That company now, we're in April, they've done just huge amounts of growth. I can't say like how much, but we fixed all that, got their brand store A plus page store up. We actually took them from Vendor Central to Seller Central, got them all brand registry, got them looking real good. I actually think they won some awards at like one of the largest trade shows in their industry. And their sales are going to be pretty solid this year, which is like a win-win for both of us. But yeah, wow. If there's any particular area that you want to dive into, because that question was so broad, yeah.
No, I think that's a really good example. And, how much of your work really requires you to be, more than anything else, an accountability partner? Because like with my work with consulting, I don't do implementations. I'm not an agency. I've built and run agencies. I won't do that again. I have no desire to build an agency again. I really love being an independent consultant. Man, you guys in the agency life, it's a hard life, man. It's real challenging. I spent many years in agency land and have no desire to going back to doing 60, 80-hour weeks again. But a large part of my consulting work, I just say, look, I'm an accountability partner. I'm going to, oftentimes when I go in, the suppliers, the B2B manufacturers, wholesalers, and distributors that I'm working with, they have a pretty good idea of what they need to do, but they want, first of all, they want the air cover of an outsider to come in and tell them, yep, that's what you need to do, and this is the direction you need to go, and here's the steps that we're going to take together to get you there, and I'm going to hold you accountable to making sure that you actually do those steps and we achieve that outcome that strategically you've said is the priority for the business. And so I think that it's almost like a personal trainer, right? You can go to the gym 5 days a week, whatever, on your own, not have a personal trainer, and you can go there and you can fluff around and you can maybe do 2 exercises each day. You might even spend an hour there. But if you're not getting the results that you want, sometimes it requires having an accountability partner to make sure that you have the focus you need to get the outcome you desire. And I almost think of me or you or anybody that works in this space, oftentimes it really just does require us, to have the balls to tell our customers when their baby's ugly, because that's a hard thing to do. Because for these business owners, their business is their baby. Like, they've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this. And so internally, it's hard.
I've never said your baby's ugly, but I would...
yeah. But it's a hard thing, right? Because internal teams, they're afraid of losing their job. So even if they see something that's wrong,
Totally.
oftentimes they don't necessarily feel safe enough to be able to say that, to be able to escalate that to management and say, maybe we should be doing this instead, or maybe we should tweak this. And so I feel like as a consultant or as an agency, we are brought in many instances to be the disruptor so that they can disrupt from within so that they don't get disrupted from without. And how much do you feel the weight of that responsibility with your clients?
I think there definitely is weight to the responsibility, but it goes back to, before we take on a client, we got to understand the business and what their goals are. And a lot of times it's in that preliminary conversation where a lot of the expectations will come out. And that's where, coming from an experienced team, having scaled brands before, we can help them set that expectation or reset that expectation. For instance, there is a company that we worked with in the past. They were doing really well. We were growing them 20, 30% a month, year over year. And that was simply by following our checklist, being accountable every week, having a team just go through all the aspects of the content, of the advertising, making sure that you're just showing up the way you should on Amazon week in, week out, right? But they decided to cut the advertising budget, which was a huge driver of helping their bottom 80% of the catalog, their items. Usually the top 10 or 20 are driving 80% of sales. So part of a strategy that we take is, hey, how do we actually add more products to that list? And the best way to do that is through advertising, and doing that in a cost-effective advertising. And they said, hey, we're cutting this budget very drastically. And so, okay, I just want to let you know, you're not going to experience the growth that you did anymore. But I would say that for that company, that was a hard conversation, because we're in the middle of negotiating what the next year is going to look like. And they had set goals. And we said, hey, this is probably not going to be realistic. And what happened was they weren't able to meet that goal. And they ended up leaving us. And then the following year coming back and saying, hey, we want to work with you guys again. And so I had to have a hard conversation with them again and say, hey, there are certain expectations and certain requirements that we need in order to help you perform. That's just one example. And one lesson I learned, there is power in words, and there has to be accountability on both sides. In a partnership, right? Anytime you work with somebody, anytime you decide to do business together, you're making a mutual agreement. And at least I believe that my word should be respected just as much as your word should be respected. And that in terms of like our organization, we try to keep it as flat as possible in terms of everybody's accessible. It doesn't matter where you come from, where you are. your voice is respected and valued. So anyways, that's just a small story, just in terms of expectations. But to your original question, yes, there is weight in terms of these companies rely on us to hit some targets, some sales targets they make. They have to report to a board a lot of times. And so we help them by thinking, what do they need to succeed? Putting our shoes in the client's position, either the owner of the business or the Amazon lead, the Walmart lead, e-com lead, whoever it is. And having been in those roles before, I know the pressure as well that they experience. And a lot of times they have families. A lot of times they're not just thinking about how do we make more money for the business, for the brand, but how do I keep my job? How do I shine? And so that's part of what I try to do as well and teach my team to do is, hey, how do you provide them things that they're not asking for that will be helpful and help them in their job? And yeah, just a quick example. And I think that's something that anybody can think about is, hey, how do I just putting yourself in the other person's shoes just for a second, it just adds a lot more perspective and it humanizes the whole experience a little bit more.
Yeah, I think empathy is a superpower, is what I always say, and I couldn't agree more. I think empathy is what really sets the great leaders in our industry apart from the average leaders. I think empathy, both for teams, for families, for agendas that they have, personal agendas, career agendas, etc. I think having empathy for that is the way that we connect. It's the way that we build human connection, right?
Yeah.
And that's what builds trust. So totally on board with that. And how do you think about major market disruptions like tariffs? I have to get into the nitty gritty of tariffs, but just massive market disruptions, wholesale market disruptions in general. And how much of your customer base, I know you say you work with 1P vendors, 3P vendors, and maybe we'll talk about a little bit more about what that even means, because some of my audience may not have heard that terminology before. They may not have heard the term vendor central before. They may not have heard the term seller central before. 1P, as I understand it, is effectively you're selling directly to Amazon and then they're on selling to the end customer. So Amazon
Correct.
is your customer in a 1P scenario. You're integrating your products in via Vendor Central. Amazon is placing their orders with you via Vendor Central, and then you ship them effectively to Amazon, or you can be shipping in some instances on behalf of Amazon in a drop ship scenario to their customer that they've made the sale to. And then there's 3P, which is effectively you're just another marketplace participant where you're listing your own goods at your own price that you set. One more final thing on the Vendor Central side, Amazon is setting the retail price for that good. Whereas in a 3P scenario, you're selling the goods directly via the Amazon marketplace. You're setting the price. You're setting the margins that you need to make. Now, obviously, Amazon has a big influence on that because they, in some respects, dictate pricing to make sure that they have the most competitive price online for any product that you sell. But then we also have this other bifurcation that's happening, not just 1P versus 3P on Amazon. And there are some brands that are hybrid, meaning they sell both, but also we have this bifurcation between regular Amazon and Amazon Business. And Amazon Business is the B2B side of Amazon. So how many of your customers are taking advantage of Amazon Business? Because there's been quite a few stories recently around Amazon wanting to fill out categories for B2B sales that they currently don't service or don't have a really broad range in.
Absolutely.
And they want to work with more B2B suppliers that can supply at scale to business buyers. And this is something that Amazon has made a lot of noise about. It's an area that I work in very heavily in the B2B space. So I'd love your thoughts around 1P, 3P, retail versus B2B.
Absolutely. I think if you are a manufacturer that has traditionally sold using like a Staples or any product that office managers buy, Amazon Business is going to be critical for you because there really only are two players. I think it's Staples and Amazon Business, right? If you want to use your corporate card and buy products for the office space and you want a portal where you see a massive assortment of products and selection and availability, right? It's Staples, Amazon Business. Unfortunately, everybody else has closed down. So that is just unfortunately the unfortunate reality. You got to be on there. I think the other portion is something that, in terms of Amazon Vendor Central, that's where, to your point, you are selling directly to Amazon. And if you don't have that relationship right now, you probably won't get it unless you prove tons of sales traction on Seller Central, like rapid growth, like top 1% growth rate. You're not going to get the invite and switch over. Um, and if you do have an existing account, if you're not big enough in a category, because Amazon buys on a certain cost price, and say you have, I don't know, notebooks, and the list price is $10. Amazon's cost price is, say they started buying from you back in 2010. Their cost price is $250. That isn't going up. So then a lot of times our discussion becomes, do we transition to Seller Central? Just ignore the Vendor Central business. Do we get more profit margin there? Because there we can control our list price. We have a lot more levers of control. We can control how much inventory we have available in stock, because sometimes Am doesn't buy a lot and they just run out of stock because it's all algorithm driven. Right.
And they then expect you to ship directly from your own. They want to minimize the amount of stock that they hold, and they want you to ship directly to their customer.
Exactly. There's a lot of chargebacks, a lot of different co-op agreements, and don't know if the following year you're going to get a price increase, and et cetera, et cetera. But what I did want to point out was, for manufacturers and brand owners these days, the war is actually between where you hold inventory. So right now, the biggest players are Amazon, and then Walmart is like pretty far below, but they're the biggest dominant players. And the battle over the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be, who do you prioritize to set inventory? Who do you prioritize in terms of your advertising channel? Because Amazon wants that availability. When you search for aspirin, they want Amazon to have all the options available, because then it creates a sticky pot, their marketplace. So that's where the value comes from. As a manufacturer, as a brand owner, you actually have control in where you put. You will have control in the future. Maybe not now, because Amazon has such a huge market share, but in the future, that's just something to think about, is you have power in that as a collective, and it's just some food for thought. But yeah, in terms of, one thing I learned is, whether you go Amazon Vendor Central, whether you go Amazon Seller Central, whether you even decide to give up the Amazon business and let distributors take that on, these days, the setbacks and challenges that companies are facing, especially the smaller ones with tariffs or increase in logistics costs, increase in wages, et cetera, those setbacks and challenges, those are opportunities to grow as a leader. And at least that's something that I've learned. And if you want to build a 10 million, 50 million, $100 business, you have to first become that 10, 15, $100 million leader. And leaders, they approach challenges very differently, whether they're small or large. And a lot of times they address it head on. They think very tactically and without emotion about what to do about it. They set the course, and if it works, if it doesn't work, they change course. But I think the problems that folks are experiencing now, owners are experiencing now, it's really no different than if you experience personal problem. I went through something personal about a year ago that was huge, probably like top 5 hardest things I went through. And it's no different whether it's a personal problem, a business problem, a relational problem, financial problem, right? It's how do you rise up and skill up and see the situation differently with a different point of view, and just accept it, embrace it, do something about it, and then keep going forward and stay consistent. So that's one thing that I've learned I'm getting better at, and something that I think the strong leaders are already facing problems that way.
Yeah, I like to contextualize this through the lens of wartime versus peacetime generals, right? Yeah. Anybody can be a peacetime general. When things are flowing easily, when things are flowing nice, when business is going well, when the economy is up, when interest rates are down, everybody's happy. Champagne, cocaine, everybody's happy, right? When things are tough, that's when you need a wartime general, or that's when you need to be able to become and pivot towards becoming a wartime general. That's actually when experience counts for something. That's when, having been through a couple of recessions, major market downturns, maybe even the liquidation of a business, maybe even having dealt with a staff member that's maybe stolen from you, or taken your IP and then started a competing business, or whatever the case may be. I think that hardship is what builds resilience and strength. I think that easy time, it's very difficult to learn much in the easy times. A rising tide floats all boats, right? And so if the market is up and to the right, everybody's a stock market genius when the market is up and to the right, right? It's times like today, the diamond hand hodlers like myself that have seen, I haven't sold a single US equity. I haven't sold a single thing over the last month of market volatility. In fact, I'm buying more, and I will continue to buy more, because the reality is I've seen this play before. I've seen this outcome before. I'm 50 years old. I've been able to watch many years of market gyrations. I've been able to watch many years of economic gyrations. I have 2008, actually, the first was the dot-com bust. Like, I was there for that. And then, of course, the 2008 crisis. And then, of course, COVID. And now this, and many other smaller downturns in between in multiple countries. Because I grew up in the US, lived in New Zealand for almost 30 years, now been living in Mexico for the last 3.5. So I've traveled extensively around the world. So I haven't just seen it through this American-centric lens. And so my advice in relation to this is, the more traveling you can do, the more foods you can eat, the more people that you can befriend from different cultures, the more places you can live, the more global experience you can get, no matter what way you can get it, the better off you will be, because it brings essential context to every single business decision you will be forced to make moving forward. And if you only have a one-track mind with a single lens of looking at things, you will miss shit. And I'm not saying you won't miss shit if you're more of an internationalist. You still will, but you are able to see around corners better, and your pattern recognition skills get better the more patterns you are able to see over time. And I think this is the thing for me that is what takes someone from being a peacetime general to a wartime general.
Absolutely. 100%. You need those reps. You need those reps where you're hurting, you're in the fire, you're in the pain, right?
Yep.
And it's where you first make the decision in your mind to rise up. I think there's so much power in simply making the decision and just proclaiming it and saying, hey, this is not going to bankrupt the business, or this is not going to shut us down, or we're going to get better. We're going to get through this. The first step, I think, is just making that decision. And so you're absolutely right. Agree 100%. I would say that I haven't always had diamond hands like you have, but I'm learning. Right?
Yeah. Fear, I tell you, it's a powerful thing, right? It's a very
is.
powerful thing, especially when you see your portfolio get cut in half and you're like, oh, geez, okay. But what is the idea? Choose to reframe things. That's my go-to methodology to maybe change mindset, change heart set, is how can I reframe this? If something that I bought, and I'm mostly in indexes anyway, so I'm de-risked heavily anyway by being in indexes, but because I don't think individual stock picks, most people can't win by individual stock picks. There's hundreds of indexes you can choose from as well. And so the reality is that I think if something was good for me to buy 2 months ago, if it's 50% cheaper today, like if I went to the store and food was 50% cheaper today than it was a week ago, I would be rejoicing. I would be happy. Why is it any different if the stock market goes on sale by 50%? Why wouldn't I look at that and say, over time, since the beginning of the S&P 500, it's averaged 11.8% per year gains. So the reality is that's over a damn long window of time. So the law of averages says it's probably going to revert to the mean. So the last 2 years, 23 and 24% up over the last 2 years. Ridiculous. Like, it could never continue on like that, right? But it's probably going to drop back to the mean, about 11.8% per year. So unless I need to sell tomorrow to feed myself, in which case you probably shouldn't have your money in the stock market. If you need to pull it out to feed yourself, you probably shouldn't be in the stock market in the first place. And so for me, I'm like, if it goes on sale, if I look at my portfolio and it's 25% down, then I can buy more at a 25% discount. And that's how I see it. And that's how I contextualize it in my mind so that I don't panic and I don't freak the hell out. But I see people, you've got to create these. First of all, it takes incredible knowledge of yourself. And it takes the ability to say, what kind of frameworks do I need to use to deal with my mental, emotional, and in many cases, spiritual state? What kind of tactics do I need to leverage to be able to address my state at any given point in time? And by putting those tools in your toolbox, so, okay, I've been through this before. I know I'm going to feel emotionally. What kind of things can I put into place to help make sure that I don't make rash or irrational decisions in the heat of the moment, and that I make a very considered decision in the heat of the moment? And that's true in business. It's true in investing. It's true in family decisions. It's true in kind of every decision we make in our life, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, there was a lot there. 100%. Yeah, I agree. I think in terms of that growth that we're talking about, right? And
well, a business. So this is my saying, right? This is, and I'm sure I've read this somewhere at some stage. I don't think I invented this saying, but the reality is, a business can never grow beyond the growth of its leader. That's the reality, or leadership.
Yeah.
So a business will never, ever outgrow the growth of the person who's leading that business.
Yes.
And so the reality is, we have to, as leaders, as entrepreneurs, as people that have teams, staff members, people's livelihoods are relying on us to be able to continue to learn and improve so that we can help lead our business through phases of growth, phases, eras, seasons, whatever you want to call it, right? So the reality is, if we're not growing and we're not improving as leaders, then it's highly unlikely, unless we're willing to really take on some pretty harsh outside criticism and some outside leadership. But the reality is, you can outsource tactics, but you can't outsource strategy. That's the reality, right? And so if you don't have a vision for what you want your business to be and do in the world, then no one else can give you that vision. You either have it or you don't. And that's where people like you and me can come in, and we can help those leaders achieve that vision with our support. But if they don't have the vision, it's got to start there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would even go a step further, is not just outsourcing, not being able to outsource the strategy, the tactics, the execution, but it's the leadership as well that you can't outsource, because there are always going to be people watching you. Any opportunity. And the biggest thing that I'm seeing these days is a lack of standards and a lack of keeping people accountable to those high standards. Because if you want to perform at a high level and really be the leader in a category, you have to perform that way, and you have to keep the standards that way. Just one quick personal example. I remember when I was in college, I was meeting with a dad that I knew, and we touched on spiritual a little bit. And so this is going to be one of those stories. But this dad was saying every day he'd come home from work, he would see his neighbor, right? His neighbor was a grumpy old man. He would say, let's just call him Bob. He would say, "Hey, Bob." And didn't say anything, didn't even look at him, didn't acknowledge him. And they're neighbors. And he lives out in Portland, Oregon, and in an area there. And this went on for years. This went on for 3, 4, 5 years. And one thing about that friend was, he was actually, I think he was working at a nonprofit at the time. It was a faith-based nonprofit. And I am a follower of Jesus, right? I love his principles that he teaches. Treat others as well as you treat yourself. Those are things that I'm always trying to get better at and improve it. But I follow Jesus, and he does too. And basically what happened is, just over a period of 10 years, this old dude watched this guy go through ups and downs in life with his family. His kids are grown now. His dog may have even died, right? And then all of a sudden, Bob walks out to his front door and knocks and says, "I don't know what it is about you, but there's something special. There's something special." I believe, obviously, and he wanted, and then the guy that I knew was like, "Hey, let me tell you who that special person is. It's Jesus." But even beyond that, I think what he saw was the leadership that he displayed during the hard times. I think there were times where they almost lost their house, and other aspects of that happened in his life. And that old guy from the outside was able to see how he handled it, how he treated his family, how he was able to come home, even though he had a lot going on his plate, and show up for his kids. And in that same regard, I think in that same attitude, I think the leaders that we're seeing are doing well, are showing up for their team, they're showing up for their clients. Even though things are hard, they're showing up in ways, they're saying, hey, things are bad, but we got this. And in terms of like the tactics that you learn, like breathing techniques or ways to change your point of view, those are things that you learn over time. But I think just in terms of the strategies and tactics and just getting those reps in, that is definitely an experience thing. But the experience starts today. It's a choice.
Yeah.
When you face something difficult, do you see it as a learning opportunity? Do you ask the question, hey, what's the gift here? What is the opportunity here? Or do you say, woe is me, this sucks, what's going on?
Yeah, no question about it. I like to say, and I like to think in my mind always, life is happening for me, not to me. And if I can truly believe that in my heart of hearts, then everything's going to turn out just fine, because you either learn or you win, right? I couldn't agree more. Business is a learning journey. It will make you learn. It will force you to learn more about yourself than maybe you ever wanted to know. It will force you to look into those deep, dark parts of yourself that maybe you wanted to keep covered up. But no, I couldn't agree more. I think that you call out some very good points there. And I think having empathy for our team, having empathy for our customers, having empathy for our partners, our manufacturing partners, et cetera. Because I tell you, no matter how hard you think you might have it, there is someone in the world that has it way worse than you. So I think having that empathy gene and culturing and forging that empathy gene over time, I think that's a really important skill and character trait to develop over time. No question about it. Now, look, as we come down to the end of our time together, an hour has absolutely flown by. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I've learned a ton from you. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you if they want to talk about this whole Amazon thing, Walmart, if they want to talk about the services that you offer, how you do what you do? What's the best way to get a hold of you? Is it LinkedIn? Is it your website? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, what I wanted to offer as well is we have an internal playbook, and we've developed it with our 9 pillars. It's a checklist for how we actually operate and find opportunities and stay consistent in building an Amazon business. We have that playbook. Would that be like helpful to offer to your audience if they're interested in it?
That'd be amazing. I'll grab the link from you. You can send me the link and I'll put it in the show notes, and people can click through and get it from there. But in terms of reaching out to you directly,
Yes.
is LinkedIn the best?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm a little bit more responsive on IG, Instagram, actually.
Instagram. Wow. Amazing.
So,
Cool.
yeah, if you just look for me at one Joshua Lee, ONE, you got to spell it out, Joshua Lee. Would love to send you that as well. If you just DM me Edge Playbook, I'll send that over to you as well. It'll be in the show notes, but that's how people can find me and get that as well.
And of course, I'll link also to your flstudios.website, and they can get a hold of you through there as well. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me one question, any question you like. It can be personal or professional. Mr. Joshua Lee from First Light, what is your question for me today?
I guess I would love to ask, what is one thing that you're dealing with personally, or you have in the past, where you had to really dig deep and say, hey, is this something that I'm going to take on and rise to, or am I going to let this kind of let this slide?
I love the personal questions. Look, COVID was for us, for those that don't know, New Zealand, one of the most locked down countries in the entire world during COVID. The government came out, flat out said, if you choose not to get vaccinated, you're going to have a lot less freedom moving forward than those that choose to get vaccinated. My wife and I don't vaccinate, and we never will. We choose to do things holistically. We choose to take the natural health route. We choose to build up our immune system naturally, and we always have. I've been taking vitamins and all sorts of supplements since I was a little kid, because my parents were into natural health as well. And so certainly there was massive societal and governmental pressure during that time to get vaccinated. I think it was in excess of 90% of New Zealanders had at least one shot. So it was certainly massive societal pressure. For over 2 years, we couldn't go to restaurants. We could only go maximum of 15 kilometers from our house. There was just incredible pressure, incredible peer pressure, incredible government pressure. We couldn't travel. We couldn't leave the country. We couldn't even fly Air New Zealand because Air New Zealand required proof of vaccination even to get on the plane. But I think that those of us who had a really strong belief system in this area, we've been vindicated now. And I think a lot of the truth is slowly starting to come out around the dangers of those vaccinations and
For sure.
the people that are dealing with long-term health consequences of taking those vaccines.
Oh, yeah.
So for us, that was probably one of the most challenging things I've ever been through in my life was to resist for over 3 years. We had to resist that full court press, advertising in our face, not being able to go to the supermarket. We had to do click and collect. Just like when I think about it now, the amount of propaganda we were just smashed with during that time for 3 years constantly. And there was just, the impact was so wide reaching. My wife and I got married during COVID. We could have a maximum of 10 people at our wedding. Then we had to delay our reception for 9 months until everything calmed down and we could have most of our family come. It was like the impact was severe. It was severe. And the fact that we stayed true to ourselves during that time was something I look back on with an immense amount of pride.
Absolutely. Yeah. Respect to you for doing that. And those were crazy times for sure.
Yeah.
The world was very divided. It still is. I feel like it's less now. Well, maybe not. I don't know. There was very polarizing opinions and views based on what the media was able to sow into society, just through the headlines and titles and all the mandates that came out of that. I just want you to know as well, I didn't get the vax either. And It was a personal choice. I don't think I went through hard times like you did because we had a baby when it first came out. So part of it was like, we're just not going to get it because we're inside anyways. And mama's breastfeeding, so we don't know. It wasn't recommended. But in terms of, I didn't feel comfortable putting a non-traditionally proven method, and I don't know the science behind it, but I just know that they accelerated it through the FDA process. And I don't even think they did human trials, but it's just my quick take on it.
Oh, thank you. Congratulations on sticking to your guns as well. And it sounds like you've got healthy, happy children. So that's all that we can hope for and pray for. Congratulations. I've really appreciated the conversation. I'll drop all the contact information for you into the show notes, and I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Thank you for your time. If you'd like to get mentored by Jason for free, head over to greenwoodconsulting.net, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click Get Mentored by Jason.